The GRCS is a powerful tool, and in the hands of a trained operator, it is capable of doing some amazing work. However, in the hands of untrained personnel, accidents from misuse of the device are bound to happen. So it's very important that any persons intending to use the GRCS for the first time receive some empirical training in the application and proper use of the device before going out and actually using it. The GRCS has a safe working load limit of 2,000 pounds, which is easily accomplished through its internal reduction gearing and hands of a single operator. And I'm going to point out right here and now that any more than one set of hands cranking on the handle of this device is one set of hands too many. Not only is it possible to break the handle, but much worse, a line, a block, or a rigging point could also fail. So when pulling or tension in a line with the GRCS, always remember that it is strictly a single person operation.
Under no circumstances should you have more than one person pulling on the handle. You can overload the system, you can break the handle, you'll be breaking rigging points, you'll run lots and lots of risks. This is a one-man operation.
For the safety of everyone, it is essential the GRCS be mounted firmly. Loose mounting of the winch frame can cause the device to slip up or shift around on the trunk of the tree and result in load bearing on the fair leads, as well as possible loss of the load itself. So sufficient tension in the mounting strap must be set to hold the device securely. Here, the assistance of another person can be of great help. In most applications, the top of the frame mount should be aligned with the rigging point, or direction the line is coming from. By design of the mounting frame, this will direct all forces put on the winch onto the top mounting pads, and by it ensure that the unit stays securely in its place. Also, aligning the frame to the rigging point directs the load from the winch drum straight up through the top fair lead, which eliminates the chance of load bearing on that fair lead. And here again, I'm going to point out that all operators clearly understand that the fair leads of the GRCS are not meant for load bearing. They are rope guides only. It's recommended that no more than 15 degrees of line deflection right against the top or side fair leads. Any angle greater than that, you can consider the operation as being conducted improperly and dangerously. The subjected fair lead could fail and result in loss of the load and injury.
This is the worst thing you can possibly do. You're going to put all the load on that fair lead, and the winch is powerful enough that will be able to make that fair lead fail. So you have to remember when you're using the GRCS, the fair leads are not load bearing. They're not intended to be, they're guides. There it goes. This fair lead is about to let go. There we go. It's something you never want to do with your GRCS. Bending the rope around the fair leads more than a few degrees, 15 degrees, is not recommended. In fact, you cannot do it. You cannot do it and be safe. Safe and proper use of the GRCS requires proper use of the fair leads, which means minimizing the rope bend, keeping it under 15 degrees. Okay, here we're going to demonstrate a side pull using the side fair lead, which would be okay in a light pulling operation, or if you're redirecting from one tree to another and you want to keep your GRCS away from the tree you're working on. However, in this case, we're going to be pulling a big load, and coming through that side fair lead is going to put a lateral load on the mount, and we're probably going to get to the point where we rupture bark on this tree.
Hard side pulls with the GRCS can result in the entire unit shifting around the trunk and rupturing the bark of the tree.
And as the mount moves, we increase the angle of deflection around this side fair lead. And if it moves beyond 45 degrees, there's a possibility that we can fail this fair lead and have some serious trouble with the winch.
Which reflects poorly on one's work habits if this happens on a leaf tree, and it lays the ground for a liability suit by the property owner.
I think it's safe to guess that if we left this kind of damage behind on a job site, we'd have a pretty unhappy customer, not to mention having committed a crime against nature by damaging this poor tree needlessly. This all could have been prevented by using a redirect block above the winch, preventing that lateral movement.
Using a block to redirect the line for side pole applications is the recommended method.
And now we'll be able to come straight through this upper fair lead, wrap it around the winch. We have no bend in the rope there whatsoever, so we're not adding to the load. So this is the optimal way to do a side pull with the GRCS, and the only way we recommend doing any pull of any significance.
As with the GRCS, it is as important that the block be securely mounted so it doesn't slide down or around the trunk.
And then put the handle in.
Fixing the block to a spar or large limb can work also. But when using a limb or spar, one must be absolutely certain of its strength to handle the loads expected. Otherwise, such mounting of the block may in itself be very unsafe.
Now in this case we have the block attached to a limb. And I feel very confident about this limb. It's about 16 inches in diameter. It's a strong, healthy tree. And the block attachment is very close to the trunk.
With any redirect application, the operator must stay out of the line of bite. Because if either the sling, block, or limb should fail, they could be seriously injured or killed.
You can see the bite of this sling that's holding the block is pointing directly to where a person would be standing if he were cranking the winch from the other side. So you have to be cognizant of where you're standing if you don't want to ever put yourself in the rigging. If something were to fail and let go, this block could do some serious damage and cause a lot of injury.
Always keep to the opposite side of where anything could fly if a sling or block lets go.
Would be a very dangerous place to stand. So I want to crank the winch from this side and stay away from any potential hazards where the sling holding the block to fail, or even if the rope were to break.
Using a GRCS often puts the operator under the rigging point. And in this scenario, it is most important for the operator to stay clear of the drop zone whenever the work is actively swinging towards the rigging point. Because when the work swings towards a rigging point, it is also the time when any funky knots or faulty rigging is likely to fail. And two, when stepping into the drop zone to take the line out of the self-tailer to lower the work, the operator must be extremely careful and proficient in the method. Because when improperly done, the wraps can spin off the winch and result in the load falling on the operator.
If that happens under a heavy load, you run the risk of spinning the ropes off the drum and the load coming down in a free fall. That is the absolute most dangerous thing you can do. The operator would be right in the bullseye of that drop zone.
So when taking the line out of the self-tailer, it is imperative the operator keep it perpendicular to the drum and maintain tension while undoing any wraps and placing the line in the pigtail fair lead. The importance of doing this correctly cannot be stressed enough, because the consequences of making a mistake here can be deadly.
Prepare ourselves to lower. Get the handle out of the way, The operator stands on the side of the drum so he can peel the wraps off and keep the wraps perpendicular to the long axis of the drum. When we get down to the number of wraps that we've determined we need to control the piece, we keep tension in the rope, flip the pigtail up, and pop the rope into the pigtail from down below. Now we're ready to lower the piece under control.
Such are the hazards that come with working under the rigging point. But it doesn't have to always be that way. In most situations, the winch or the rigging point itself can be repositioned to eliminate the hazard. It doesn't take a lot of time to do either, and in the long run, it's much safer for everyone.
Ready to rig!
During braking operations, it's a common procedure to allow the work to run. There's a number of reasons why. For one, by allowing the work to run gives a margin of safety for it to drop and swing clear of the climber. For another, it reduces the dynamic forces on the rigging points. And last, it just expedites the work. The operator of the GRCS must remember that when letting the work run, they should never stop it suddenly. Sudden stops can be hard on the rigging points and the pigtail fairlead. A good rule to follow is to position yourself so the line runs straight through the pigtail fairlead.
If we're going to let something run, we need to be standing back and allowing the rope to run freely through the pigtail and let the wraps on the drum do the actual braking.
If not, the drag on the line from running at an angle through the pigtail can have negative effects on one's ability to let it run smoothly.
If you have a situation where you're going to let a piece run, what you see here is the rope making a severe bend around the pigtail. That's going to add a lot of extra friction and prevent the rope from running. And also, if you happen to have a hockle in the rope, the hockle can catch in this slot made by the pigtail bend.
And here too, stopping the work suddenly can jolt the entire system and bend the pigtail. The exact degree is dependent on the number of wraps and the momentum of the work. But bending the pigtail fairlead can also cause it to fail. And if that happens, the load line can spin off the drum and you will lose the load.
Remember, like the other fairleads, the pigtail is not a load-bearing component. So if you're in a situation where you don't have enough wraps on the drum and you have a severe bend around the pigtail and you drop a big piece and you shock load the drum, you're also going to shock load the pigtail. And that is potentially dangerous because with a severe enough shock load, you will be able to tear this pigtail off. It's kind of a fine point, but sometimes you can use the pigtail for extra friction, but you don't want to be doing that in a shock-loaded situation. And letting a piece run and breaking it slowly is something that is a skill that you have to develop over time, and develop it by starting with small pieces, letting them run, bringing them to a slow stop. The real danger in rigging big pieces comes when you let them run and let them build up a lot of potential or kinetic energy, and then you want to put the brakes on in a big hurry. That's when you can shock load the rope, you can shock load the block, you can shock load the rigging point, and that's where the real danger occurs. So,
the true knowledge of rigging work comes only from years of experience. It cannot be learned overnight. What I can say for the beginner is, on each new job, start out with small pieces and advance gradually up to the larger ones. This way you can develop a better feel for it, and in the years ahead you will be safer, more proficient, and a better rigger.